Hi, everybody. This is Alex from Pang Attack and Pete International Airport, and you're watching Concerts That Made Us.
Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, Concerts That Made Us. Interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down. The greatest live shows and the cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
Alex, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Pleased to be here. Happy to be here.
It's great now. I'm looking forward to diving into your music over the next bit. Now, first off, you collaborated with Peter Holmstrom from the Dandy Warhols on the upcoming Pete International Airport EP, Sea of Eyes. It's set for release on November 20th. Take us a bit deeper into the EP.
So this is an EP of remixes, primarily the Sea of Ice song, which was the first song on the album, the album that came out last year. It felt like the end of the world, which is, I think, their third album. And yeah, they over the course of three albums, they've collaborated with all kinds of people, and every album has a whole bunch of guest vocalists. And so I was really pleased to be invited to collaborate with Pete.
I'd say so. I'd say so. How did the actual collaboration come about?
For me, it's sort of like something that fell from the sky. It was really unexpected. Um, he had heard my music. He had heard Pang Attack through a mutual connection that we had. Joe Yarmish from the band Soons, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with Soons. They're sort of they're from Montreal, where I'm from, and I guess they'd been touring on the west coast of North America, and they'd met Pete when they played in Portland, had stayed in touch, and yeah, a couple years later, I had released an album, and Soons had shared a song on their social media, and Pete heard it and said, "I really like that guy's voice, and I'm gonna ask him to sing on my album." And there you have it. I was like, okay.
Right,
Uh,
right. I get you. I get you. You know, as you mentioned, Pang Attack, you're known as the vocalist and guitarist.
yeah.
How do you approach a collaboration like this compared to your own music with Pang Attack?
Yeah, well, I'm guitarist, vocalist, and Panic Attack, and primary songwriter. So usually I often work on songs alone uh, with the band, and then I bring them in to either to the jam space or the studio. And in this case, it was a completely different process. So um, and it was cool, that's part of the fun thing was and the interesting thing for me was just um, learning, about how this kind of I had no idea. I had no blueprint, and the whole time I'm thinking, okay, these guys are in a pretty big band, um, then sort of have played with all kinds of musical heroes of mine, and like Rachel Goswell is on the new album, so I ended up on an album with Rachel Goswell of Slowdive, which still seems weird to me, but hey, I'll take it. And so yeah, he sent me a bunch of demos essentially, and this was during COVID. So he's like, all right, here's a bunch of demos. Here's essentially the album. Um, which ones would you like to work on? I had a couple that I sort of fixated on immediately, which I was like, okay, I can really see myself singing on this, ideas immediately start flowing on demos which were in a certain key, which would have fit my voice. So yeah, and I had no idea how it was gonna work. So I just started sketching ideas. We were sending them back and forth via WeTransfer, and yeah, it somehow worked out.
Right. When it came to actually working together, the recording production, what was the dynamic between you two like? Did he give you much creative freedom over it, or what was it like?
Yeah, yeah, it was mostly hands off. So that was a pleasant surprise to know that, here was somebody who, without really knowing me, we've only met in person once, and that was last March when the Dandies were touring North America. They came through Montreal on a swing. It was like Eastern North America, Boston, Montreal, Toronto, Detroit, I think. And yeah, he was just like a couple of pointers. He's like, this song, one of the songs, he was like, I'm really hearing like an Ultravox, Vienna sort of vibe on this one. I was like, wow, okay, 80s deep cut. Well, actually, no, pretty big hit actually, but for
Mm,
people of a certain age. But that was cool.
yeah.
But most aside from that, it was like, just do your thing.
Mm. Ah. And is there any do you have any actual memorable moments from recording, and was there any challenges, anything that popped up along the way?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was challenging in the sense that I put a ton of pressure on myself, especially the first track, which was Out Past the Razor Wire, which is on the Sea of Eyes EP, remixed by a couple of different people. Um, at that point, it was COVID. Everything was sort of locked down in Montreal. I hadn't been into a studio in maybe like 3 years. So, you get a bit rusty, and then all of a sudden you have like, although, it's sort of like riding a bike after a while, but just to that, at that point, I hadn't been into a studio in about 3 years. There was all this weird sort of psychic sort of intensity surrounding COVID, and everyone was sort of going crazy. And I don't know how it was for you guys, but we were hit pretty hard in Eastern North America. So
Yeah.
anyways, let's not even go there. But yeah, it was mainly the pressure that I was putting on myself. So memories wise, the first one, I went into the studio of one of my friend's studios, and just hammered out actually like way too much stuff because I wasn't sure how it was going to work. So I did like, 4 vocal tracks layered on top of each other. I did like I had harmonies that I was panning left and right. It was like way too much stuff. Just like packed it into a massive file and sent it off. And he was like, and then didn't hear anything for a while. And he's like, hey, this is great. I love this, but only ended up using, like the best vocal track. So yeah, that was pretty memorable. And then the subsequent tracks, I kind of relaxed and just send a couple, and just get a good take, and leave it at that.
Yeah, true. 2 singles have been released already, Sea of Eyes and Out Past the Razor Wire.
Mm.
What else can we expect from the rest of the EP, do you think?
I'm not sure if there's going to be any other singles, so I'm like the release strategy is all up to Peter. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just like great. It's really cool stuff. And there is an Andy Bell remix,
Okay.
Andy Bell of Ride.
Yeah.
So shoegaze band, classic veteran shoegaze band, Andy
Mhm.
Bell.
That's going to be cool.
Yeah, it's great. I've heard it. It's awesome. It's weird hearing your vocals being remixed, by Andy Bell on a song by Pete Holmstrom of
Yeah.
the Dandy Warhols. I think Andy Bell, is he rejoining Oasis for I'm like, what the hell? What's going on? I think he is.
Crazy.
I think he's on the new live reunion.
Mm, I
I don't
think
know.
so. Yeah, I've heard something about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Two things you probably like 5 years ago thought would never ever happen. It's crazy.
I wasn't counting on it, you know. You never say never, but
Mm,
you know, you do meet a lot of people in the music industry. But you know, there's different groups, different locations.
yeah,
So yeah, a
yeah.
pleasant surprise.
Now, Pang Attack, you've been
Yeah,
together since 2011.
yeah.
Personally, for you, how has the journey been?
The journey's been up and down, but it's been central to my life. So yeah, no, it's great. I mean, Pang Attack is my baby, and it's really my vehicle for creative expression. It's yeah, it's been central to my life and very important, I would say.
What, after 14, 13, 14 years of being in the one band, what drives you, forces you to keep going?
It's just songs that rattle around, and the degree to which you like those songs, or to which you feel strongly about those songs. And I think it was Flea for that was I was watching. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I think it was like Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's just like, if a song comes out, it's because it has to, you know, and if a song doesn't see the light of day or doesn't get finished by any given um, artist, that is because it just wasn't powerful enough or it wasn't important enough. And yeah, that stayed with me. I feel the same way. Um, yeah, and I mean, I have played in other bands during that time. I'm a drummer as well in a local band called TV Erased. I play in like we play in a Smiths cover band.
Right.
You know, so there's all kinds of stuff in the Montreal music scene. But yeah, what keeps me going is just the prospect of writing the perfect song, I guess.
How close do you think you've come? Have you done it yet?
No, of course not. There's no such thing, and you know, I've written some things that I've been very proud of. Um, and yeah, and I think that, you know, the fact that 14 years later, I mean, we're a humble band, we're a small band that, you know, gets sort of, you know, has gigged locally and across Canada, primarily, and but people are still discover, you know, a lot of our songs around the world, and that's the joy and the curse of the internet. Um, but it's just amazing to sometimes, you know, hear kids from Norway got in touch with me a couple of years ago. He's like, I love this song. When are you coming to Norway? I'm like, I just got a little weepy. I was like, well, when are we coming to Norway? I was like, I don't know. Hook us up, book the tour. We'll try to get a grant or something, you know.
Yeah. Spread the word, round up a few friends and fill a hall somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Something I couldn't help noticing was there seems to be gaps in your releases with Pang Attack. Why
Yeah.
so long in between?
Well, it's primarily the last one. So yeah, our drummer had a couple of kids. Our keyboardist already had kids, and then it was COVID. So yeah, there's a long one. So I had a lot of these songs written before COVID hit. So what was it? 2017, I think, and then COVID, and then you're like, oh fuck, and then two years go by after COVID, and you're like, okay, I'm in my 40s, and then yeah, so
Yeah.
sorry fans, we dropped the ball on this one, but you know, I mean, it's been something like almost 8 years, I think.
Mm.
And then, you know, I was the sort of the primary songwriter. So while Jan was dealing with his family life, I started collaborating with Pete. I started playing drums, and that just sort of took over. So yeah, that's the main reason.
Right. Right. How long do we have to wait? I know back in July you released a single, but how long do we have to wait for more?
About a month.
Right. Right. Good to hear. What
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything?
About the next album,
Mm-hmm.
the upcoming release. Yeah, it's called Tears for the Wave. And that's a lyric in one of the songs. Um, don't shed any tears for a wave of illusions, which is about that's in the song Rosalind, I believe. And it's yeah, it's a sort of, as with the last album, there's a lot of sort of narrative storytelling in a lot of the songs and characters and scenarios. Um, so that's taken from a song about a lonely housewife who starts hearing voices and uh, commits a crime.
Right.
But
Okay.
what else? I mean, stylistically, it's following on the sort of the influences of the last album, North Country Psychic Girls. It's great. I really love it. There's a lot of strings. It's very kind of like sleazy crooner vibe mixed with psychedelia and like a lot of soundscapes and bursts of feedback and mixed with synth and generally sort of downbeat tempo. Uh, so it's pretty badass, I would say.
Right. When you describe it like that, it sounds like a list of things that should not work well together, but obviously work very well together.
Yeah, I mean, you tell me when it comes out. I mean, I love doing that. I love taking different elements and mashing them together to create something
Mm.
unexpected. And
Yeah.
that was, yeah, like our last album, North Country Psychic Girls, was, we were calling it sort of psychedelic Motown, which was a departure from our first EPs, but it worked. And I don't know why. I mean, and I'm always hoping that it will be original. So I always liked eclectic artists like Beck or Prince, or people who can just make it work. So hopefully I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to speak about your songwriting for a minute. When you're
Yeah.
writing in a way that it's about characters as opposed to personal stories, personal issues,
Yeah.
where do you find your inspiration, and why do you choose to write like that instead of write from a personal point of view?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it used to be the earlier stuff, the earlier albums and the earlier bands that I worked in. It was just sort of, images and sort of poetic vibes, and the lyrics are, you're just coming up with a line that you like, and you can build, the lyrics around a few sentences or a few images that you like. And especially young, like you or younger, you're hoping. I don't know how other people do it. I read a lot. I studied literature, philosophy. So I think that always found its way into my lyrics. But then I found just I found it was a challenge to sort of come up with something a little less abstract and a little less vague. Um,
Right.
so yeah, there were a lot of things taken from books that I was reading in North Country. There was a David Mitchell book. I don't know if you've read David Mitchell.
No.
Um, he wrote the book Cloud Atlas, which was turned
Uh,
into not a great movie by the people who did The Matrix, but the book itself is stunning, and very complex. So I won't bore you with it. Or it's 6 o'clock in the morning here too, so I don't even know if I can remember it. But he wrote another book called The Bone Clocks, which was about like a young runaway girl who heard voices and was tormented by ghosts and spirits. And yeah, I used that. I was like, I'm going to use that. So just the general idea of it. So that was our album North Country Psychic Girls. That was sort of the psychic girl of the title.
okay.
And yeah, I just ran with that. I mean, you lift little things here and there,
Hmm.
uh, and in the new, it's all ends up being pretty dark stuff for some reason. I don't know if you're from a a country where the weather is shite. So
Yeah, exactly. It fits in well.
you know, like Canada is the same thing, or like Northern England or whatever.
Hmm.
So people read a lot. You're familiar with the darkness and the
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and Peter is too. Portland, Oregon is also like a very rainy, very moody place.
Hmm.
So yeah, and then what else did I write about? I had a couple themes. I heard something that Nick Cave had said about for him the song had a hard time being completed or starting even until he asked himself, what is this song about? And so I started doing that too, and I gave myself themes. So the first song on the new album is called Lowborn Man. And again, I just sort of invented two characters talking, at different ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, so that was a big song for us on the album. It's the first one on the album, and it's about a man in a glass tower looking down on a man with nothing, or a human. I say lowborn man in the sort of classic sense of the term, meaning lowborn human. So don't hate me, people. It could be lowborn women as well, But
Yeah.
so and that was it. And then it just sort of came rushing out. That was a good one. Uh, but yeah.
Bad. I like it. I like it. Now, the podcast is called Concerts That Made Us. So I have to ask you some concert related questions if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
First off, as a concert goer, what concerts would you say have made you?
Oh man, that's a wild question. Let me go back. We had the Lollapalooza in the 90s. I think that was the first festival I went to. It was in Barrie, Ontario. And so that's many hours away from where I live in Montreal. So we drove, and it was like late 90s or something. And it just blew my mind. I mean, it was just for the fact that it was a festival and there was so many freaks and drugs and just like people and girls. And so that was like, we saw the Beastie Boys played, and then Rage Against the Machine played. And then, none of us had ever heard Rage Against the Machine before.
Right.
And I just remember that concert was outside, and they started playing, and I think the album hadn't even come out yet, the first album with like Killing in the Name of and all that stuff. And there was nobody in the front of the stage, and within a song, everybody had just went to the front of the stage, and it was just like what your sort of like teenage fantasy of crowd surfing and madness. That was a big one. And what else? God, probably like, and these aren't necessarily bands that I listen to every day anymore. It was like kind of the 90s. But I saw the Smashing Pumpkins in the Siamese Dream tour,
Oh man.
and that was as a young buck, and that was amazing at the Metropolis in Montreal. That was wild. The Breeders
Yeah.
at the same venue in the 90s. So a lot of 90s stuff. But
Yeah.
the first concert that I ever saw in the studio, because I grew up in the countryside as well. I grew up in a small village, not even in Montreal. But I went to see AC/DC.
Right.
That was just one of my first concerts ever. So I was just like, I think it was the Razor's Edge tour. So they played Thunderstruck,
Yeah.
and I was just like freaking out, and I just got absolutely shit faced. And I think after on whiskey that I was too young to drink, and so I think like after the opening song Thunderstruck, I don't remember much because I was like busy puking my guts out.
Oh man.
So that
Quite
was a
an
lesson.
introduction to concerts.
Yeah, I had to pick up my game after that and be a little more a little less drunk.
Yeah.
But there's so many concerts. I mean, I don't know. I just saw Idols in Montreal. They're on tour, and it was just like a fabulous concert. kind of 90s like style. I mean, they're just playing this sort of hardcore music and everyone was crowd surfing, but in a respectful, fun way.
Mm.
Um,
Do you
yeah,
crowd surf yourself anymore?
I was trying to get my friends. I was like, "Come on, man! Like, let's do it." I was like grabbing the legs to lift them up, and they were like, "No, no, no." I used to, not lately.
Right. Right. You'll have to get back to it.
Hey, after that, I'll try.
And your own shows with Pang
Yeah,
Attack. For any listeners that haven't been lucky enough to catch one, what are they
yeah.
like? Give us the full experience.
It's a bit all over the place because from album to album, we've been a trio, we've been a four-piece, and then our favorite concert ever to play, and I wish we could do this show more, is we put the whole like full band, the string quartet and horns, and yeah, that was amazing. But what's it like generally? It's pretty dreamy and psychedelic and floaty and very you're just sort of like floating in a fuzzy pocket of warmth and sonic beauty.
I like
Very
that description.
yeah.
Man. And you mentioned your favorite show there. You have to tell us a bit more. I was going to ask what the high point was. So go on.
Oh, the best show
Mm.
that we played. Ah, God. That was a memorable one, the one that we did with the full band and the string quartet. And that was in Montreal because it would be an expensive one to put. So that was sort of a special show where we just played everything live. You know, we played the string parts live and we had the brass section. And it was like a puzzle, you know, it was a lot of work and we got a bunch of guest musicians up on stage, among them Joe from Soons. We had Sheena Ko, who's a great sort of electronic ambient artist. She multi-instrumentalist and she did everything. And it was one of those shows where you're like, oh, I hope this works. And you know, working with pros, you're like, that makes everything easier. It's like,
Mm.
oh, okay, not just a bunch of idiots like who are your friends. You're like, hey, come play a show. They're like, oh fuck, I can't play. Which we've done a lot of that, but this was very ambitious, wide sonic palette. We had to get the best sound man we could get our hands on, and you just hope it works. You put in the work, and then by the first song, after the first song, everybody just erupted, and we knew we were, the rest of the show was going to be a breeze and a lot of fun. So yeah.
You've mentioned you've had some bad shows in the past. Is there one that you would consider the worst, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, definitely. We played a show in Victoria, British Columbia. This was with another band. This wasn't Pang Attack. And nobody showed up.
Oh man.
So, so we, Victoria is known as a sleepy city. Usually people will go to Vancouver.
Mm.
So Victoria doesn't get many shows, but we had been booked on a tour, and Canada's massive. It's very difficult to tour physically because there's not enough density between population centers. So we show up and we've done this entire grinding tour across Canada in the winter and the snow and we're like, what is it? Had a great show in Vancouver, and then the next night we go to Victoria, and the sound guy's waiting and we're waiting. We're like, oh, it's a little thin tonight, and then nobody shows up, and we're like, well, what do we do? It's like that is, if a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? Like if a band plays to zero people, does anybody hear it? So we were like, do we even play this show or do we just fuck it? we were there with with our friends and the opening band, and we're just like, fuck it, let's just practice. We played our show. So yeah, playing to 0 people, definitely our worst show.
Right, right. You know, when you were describing that, actually, it sounded like the intro to a really good, like, 90s horror film.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Victoria is like in Canada we call it it's the home of the newlywed and the nearly dead.
Right.
So, it's a weird city, all very beautiful, but it's on the Pacific,
Hmm.
uh, very far away. It's kind of not the most exciting nightlife kind of place. Yeah,
Right, right. And why were you booked to play there then?
I don't know. These are mysterious questions that are lost in the sands of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And when it comes to showtime, then your pre-show and post-show, how do you psych yourself up? And then afterwards, how do you like to wind down?
Oh man, it's usually just drinking, excessively. Uh,
Okay, okay. Before or
you know,
after?
yeah, before I need a couple, a few drinks, just to, it's a bad habit probably. And then after, if it goes well, I'll usually like to have a couple pints, and if it goes poorly, I'll like to have a couple more pints.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. And when it comes to touring, putting on shows, how has
Yeah.
your approach changed over the years, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, you become more responsible. Like you have to, like you're not going to get, absolutely bombed, the whole time. And we've had those tours, and it's fun when you're in your 20s and maybe 30s. It becomes impossible, and yeah, we've never toured like the Dandy Warhols like for months, so it's mainly been like a couple weeks at a time. But I can't imagine, I was talking to Peter in Montreal, and then and he was going, I think, to Australia after, and these guys are, I don't know how old they are, but a little bit older than I am, and I was like, "Are you?" We were texting. I was like, "Are you? You must be fucking exhausted." Like it's so tiring. So you have to be disciplined, and you have to like get up and then go to the next place, and then sound check. And if you're, just if things get out of hand, and you just, it's just impossible, and it makes it just miserable if you're always drunk or it's fucked up. It's just like it's so impossible. So you have to be responsible. You have to be, and that's where the professionalism comes in.
Yeah, true, true. I was just thinking as you were speaking about texting Peter, would you like that at this stage in your in at this stage in your life? Would you like something similar to what he has? You said he was in Montreal, then going to Australia.
Yeah.
He's on the road for months. Would it suit?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'd be up for it. Yeah. It's a question of, just making it happen. And, that sort of like length of tour, I don't think is going to be in the books for us. But, yeah, I mean, with TV Erased on the drummer, and it's like if that happens, I'm up for it. You gotta be ready. I'm ready to go. Yeah, I
Good
am.
to hear. Good to hear. And before we dive into the last couple of questions, then future plans that are set in stone. Anything you can share with us?
Aside from releasing the album, and then that's about it. Playing some shows around Montreal and Canada. Um, that's about it. And then we've got there's talk of a fourth Pete International Airport album. So Peter sent me a couple of demos, and I'm going to start working on those. And that's it. My schedule is like I have a hard time thinking more than 2 months in advance. Um, so that's uh, that's the plan for now. Release this album, start writing new Pete International Airport songs.
I like it. I like it. I'm a bit similar myself. I tend to get a bit anxious if I think further than 2 or 3 months ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what you call that. I don't know if it's like a procrastination but yeah, same thing. It's like,
Mhm.
but if it has to be locked in stone, then so be it. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll dive into the last couple of questions. There are a couple of fun random ones.
Yeah.
First off, besides music, what are you currently obsessed with?
Aside from music, what am I obsessed with? Probably writing and books. So I've written a book and trying to revise that, edit that, get it out, find a publisher. So I guess that's an obsession. It's been a long ambition. Yeah. So that and listening to music, and I guess diving into like old rock, stories, and so I read a lot of that.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's a good one. It's a good one. It's a nice segue to my next question, actually. Old
Mhm.
rock stories. If you had to spend 24 hours locked in a room with any musician from history, who would it be?
Holy shit. Wow. Dead or alive.
Yeah.
So hard. I'm just gonna say Robert Smith of The Cure.
Right, right. Why so?
I mean, it was just one of my favorite bands of all time, and yeah, just such a weirdo, but such an amazingly creative body of work. I would just love to, and I hear he's quite a nice, lovely guy. So
Yeah.
I would just love to just chat and just know about, how the hell how has life been? Where were you when you were writing this song? How, and so yeah, that would, off the top of my head, Robert Smith.
It's a good one. It's a good one. And the
Mm.
final one, your go-to album, an album you constantly revisit.
Oh my God. Again, I'll probably be Disintegration by The Cure.
I
Yeah.
like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Great one.
1989, I think it was. I was a young kid when I heard it, and it just like, the beauty of it, the sort of sounds, the majestic glacial beauty of it just bowled me over and has stayed with me forever. But I mean, there's so many, like at different points in my life. It might not be very cool, but I don't know, like Pink Floyd, The Wall, like really stayed with me because it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
It's quite a weird album that I listened to recently again, and I was like, I really like it. A lot of people don't like the bombast of it, or they think it's like sort of bloated or whatever, but I mean, it's a really weird, creative album.
Yeah.
But my life has been music. I mean, I've got so many albums that I just like fixate on. It's hard to pick just one.
I'd well believe it. I'd well believe it. Listen, Alex, this has been a truly fascinating chat now. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to the podcast, conscience that made us. Interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down. The greatest live shows and the cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concerts that made us.com.